south of the border, down Mexico way. That's where I fell in love when the stars above came out to play. And now as I wander...
Hello there, all you expat wannabes. I'm Johnny Mueller, and you're listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America, the show that tells you just what it's like to live, work, play, and or retire down here in Latin America. It's a mix of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great, and it's all right here, so let's get started. All right, Happy New Year and many happy returns and all that. Many happy returns. What does that really mean? Could that mean in today's terms, many happy returns of those Amazon products that didn't quite fit because of those extra holiday junk food pounds you're carrying? So then how long is it going to be before you actually write the correct date, 2019? I know it takes me about a month. Yep, at the beginning of the year, people will write a lot of bad checks that way. Oops, wrong date again. Though checks are becoming a thing of the past like almost everything that has anything to do with paper, right? Which brings us to this very interesting little set of emails, since we talk about cryptocurrencies, crypto mining, and everything that has to do with that alternative world of finance. Now, if you've been sucking up to the mainstream media and are thinking that cryptocurrency mining and all that blockchain stuff is dead, well, not so fast. Have a listen to this. This is from Kelly. He says, "Dear Johnny, I get how Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies have to generally be converted to dollars or euros or some kind of funny money along the way so that you can spend them. So at least for now, it looks like Bitcoin itself, the mother of all the cryptos, is a great way to move funds around, but not so great to spend them. At least that's the impression I get, and I follow Bitcoin and crypto exchanges all the time and look at crypto chat rooms like Reddit Bitcoin, and watch a lot of so-called crypto gurus on YouTube. And, you know, even though it seems like cryptos are getting beaten to a pulp, at least in this last year, nevertheless, I see that crypto coins are being adopted more and more by small businesses especially. And now it seems you can buy all kinds of gift cards with crypto too. Even though most people don't realize it, gift cards are everywhere these days. Even Amazon and eBay have them, and you can buy them with Bitcoin and Litecoin and such. You know that nearly every retail store sells gift cards. And there are a number of web-based gift card sites like eGifter, that's eGifter, that'll accept your crypto for payment of gift cards. Hundreds of different types of gift cards too, which is one way to spend your crypto without actually having to convert it to paper money of any kind and without going through the banking system at all. And you know, if you've got a gift card, say for $100, it's as good as cash, with some gift cards like Amazon having no expiration date. But Johnny, you know, up till recently it was a mystery to me how Venezuela or other inflation-ravaged countries use Bitcoin or the other coins if banks won't convert it over there and stores won't take it. Though some might through the back door or under the table, but technically it's illegal and you can and will go to jail for it. Then he says, I found out it's actually illegal to bring cash in and out of Venezuela. The government says everything's got to be done through Venezuelan banks, and they take a huge cut and rip you off at every turn. Take, for example, remittances. You know, money coming from other countries into Latin countries. Let's talk about Venezuela. After ravaging the domestic economy, the Venezuelan regime is now taking a cut of every single dime that comes in from abroad. So, for example, if you have relatives or friends in Venezuela, like I have, and you try to send money to them, it's not so easy like sending money to Mexico or Bolivia. Normally, for example, when sending money to Mexico, Honduras, Bolivia, you can use Western Union, MoneyGrams, or even your own bank. And sure, they'll take a nice hefty 6 or 10% cut, but the government is not involved. They don't take a piece. So, except for Venezuela and Cuba, the remisa business, it's still in the hands completely of private enterprise. Now, I can tell you firsthand, Johnny, about my attempt to send remisas to my friends and family in Venezuela. Wow, Venezuela, what a sad case. You know, after ravaging the domestic economy, the Venezuelan regime is now taking a huge cut of money from any kind of remittances you send to them from abroad. It's a double whammy, too. And here's how it goes. New laws force Venezuelans to go through local banks for any and all foreign transactions or changes of money, and require the local Venezuelan banks to disclose information on how individuals get and use that money. Now, according to Alejandro Machado, a cryptocurrency researcher at the Open Money Initiative, he says a normal wire transfer from the U.S. in U.S. dollars to a bank in Venezuela will encounter a fee of approximately 56% imposed by the government as it passes from dollars to bolivars. And it's a process that could last several weeks, and by then your money's worth half or less because of the inflation on the bolivar itself. So there's your double whammy. Then he says for people with online access to their bank accounts or online bank accounts, most recently Venezuelan banks are under pressure from their government to prevent clients from using foreign IP addresses or IP address changers from accessing their online accounts. And of course, people use foreign IPs or IP changers to obscure their location and identities. But you know, those Venezuelans are clever, and here's what I've discovered. To circumvent the crushing bureaucracy, some Venezuelans have started to receive Bitcoin from their relatives abroad directly. It's now possible, in fact, to send a text message to your family asking for Bitcoin and receive it a few minutes later for a tiny, tiny fee, usually under $1. When using Bitcoin or other cryptos to send money back and forth to Venezuela, government censorship isn't possible. Bitcoin isn't routed through a bank or third party, and that's the beauty of it. Instead, it arrives on your phone wallet in a peer-to-peer way. Then you can moments later sell your new Bitcoin into fiat through a local gigantic Craigslist-style exchange. Or just load it into a flash drive, or even memorize your recovery phrase. So if you ever get shaken down by the cops, or the cops enter your premises thinking you've got cryptocurrency or you're dealing with it, there's no proof. There's nothing there. You got the keys to your bank account in your head. That's how people escape Venezuela with complete control of their savings. They converted it all to Bitcoin through that local Craigslist-style exchange. And then leave the country if you can, and most people can find a way, especially those who got a little money. Then you don't have to leave any of your dough, capital, or resources behind. Like I said, those Venezuelans are pretty creative, especially when under pressure. You know, they've been using another popular alternative, though it's becoming less and less popular and more dangerous. The way it's been done is to have your family outside of Colombia or friends wire money to a bank in Colombia. Then you walk across the border to withdraw it, then walk back into Venezuela cash in hand, which can take far longer, cost more, and be far more dangerous than the Bitcoin option. In fact, I think every Venezuelan I know has heard a story or knows someone who's been robbed that way. I know for a fact there are gangs who post lookouts outside of banks, and when they see Venezuelanos walk in, they know they're coming out with cash money. And sometimes, maybe even most times, the bank tellers or guards in the banks are in on it. And they're signaling the scouts outside who's got a handful of dough deep in his pocket. All the more reason to get on board with Bitcoin and cryptos. But you know, Venezuela isn't the only country where Bitcoin and cryptos are all the rage. Turns out in Africa, it's all over the continent. In Zimbabwe, for example, Robert Mugabe printed billions upon gazillions of paper notes. And now it's US dollars, euros, and Bitcoin that are the currencies over there. And then you got China. Did you know it's set up that China's government tracks all of your transactions on Alipay and WePay, the two largest payment financial services in the country? But they cannot orchestrate any kind of surveillance at all on Bitcoin or crypto payments. That's why the Chinese government is yo-yoing back and forth between making cryptos legal and illegal. They've done it something like 4 times now. Then we've got the case of Russia, where Vladimir Putin can target an NGO and freeze its bank account in a second, but he can't freeze a single Bitcoin wallet. And in the Middle East and the Baltics, where you've got refugee camps everywhere, nobody's using banks or bank accounts. Why would a bank open up close to a refugee camp? But there's always a Bitcoin and crypto network within the walls, even Bitcoin exchanges, as long as you can find an internet connection. Then you just log in without anyone's permission, not having to show a single ID at all. Meanwhile, here in the States, the average guy in the streets, if he's heard of Bitcoin or crypto at all, thinks it's just another fad, another tulip, timeshare, or .com bubble, which just goes to show how undereducated the average American is. In the meantime, Johnny, in the last few years anyway, as I've seen people get more and more into crypto and Bitcoin in Venezuela, I myself have been investing around 100 to 200 bucks a month directly into Bitcoin, Litecoin, and a few others. I don't really care about the price, not right now. I'm just buying in a little at a time because you have to have a ticket to get in the race. I know, I've been watching it a long time. It's like sitting on a pressure cooker. One day, it's gonna blow sky high. And people close to me that know I've got some, they say, aren't you afraid at the volatility? Aren't you afraid it's gonna go to zero? Doesn't the whole thing just scare the hell out of you? Well, these days I think it's wise not to tell anybody what you have, so I tell them I just don't have much of it anymore. But I'll tell you this, Johnny, I've upped my purchases. I'm purchasing $400 to $500 worth a month now. Johnny, mark my words, it's the calm before the storm. All right, so me, Johnny, here again. What do you think about that? Meanwhile, we're always talking about healthcare here in Latin America and how it beats the pants off healthcare where you are, including all you people up in the States who think Canada is the way to go. Listen to this one. Oh, and by the way, there are lots of Canadians listening to this show and many who come down to the seminar too. And they always get drilled with 50 questions about their healthcare system. And it's always a big surprise to Native Americans who listen to their answers because we're all kind of pre-programmed into thinking the Canadian healthcare system sets the standards for the world. Wait a minute, did I say Native Americans? You know what I mean. So you think the Canadian healthcare system's the tits of the Ritz, huh? Well, not according to this guy's email, and a couple more after it. We'll get to him. This one comes from Good Sam. Good Sam, I like that. It says, Dear Johnny, it's tiring listening to liberal socialist Bernie Sanders types from the USA, that is Americans, going on and on, complaining how much their healthcare services cost and how great it would be to have a Canadian national healthcare system. Honestly, if you don't live in Canada, you don't have a clue. Take me, for example. Last year, I had an incident where I started feeling increasing pressure in my left ear. I couldn't hear anything out of it after a while. And then the pain came. So intense, I barely managed to drive myself to the Trillium Hospital in Ectabacoque. Ectabacoque. And when I got there, Johnny, the line up to the registration was almost out the door. Every seat in the waiting area taken, and people were lined up against the walls. The only room was standing room, and there was barely any of that available. Kids were screaming, crying. People were on gurneys and in wheelchairs all over the place. I'm not kidding. The look on most people's faces was deadpan and pallid. Technically, I'd say everyone there would have been diagnosed by a psychiatrist with depression. I'm telling you, it was time to hand out the appropriate pills. It reminded me of a scene out of a zombie apocalypse movie. And you know, us Canadians are known to be laid back and stoic, and we don't complain much, you know. Anyway, what good would it do against government bureaucracy? And we're not known for hyperbole either. We're just not very good liars. I tell you, Johnny, there was no way I would have survived much longer waiting there, because my ear felt like it was going to explode. Anyhow, after I could take it no more. And at that point, it felt like banging my head against a wall. No kidding. I was able to drive myself back home and had a family member drive me all the way to Milton, where I anticipated a better waiting time. When I got there, there were only 5 people in the waiting room, but it still took me 5 frickin' hours to see a doctor. In the meantime, my head was literally exploding. I am serious. I thought I was going to go insane from the pain. I don't know how many people have ever had an earache so bad that you almost felt like you wished there were a button or a pill you could take to get it over with, to end it all. I'm telling you, that's the point I was at. Luckily, towards the 4-hour mark, something in my ear had popped and the pain started to diminish. Oh, and about the convenience and comfort level of that waiting room. The chairs in the room where the doctor saw me had duct tape holding whatever material was still on the arms together. Yep, a first world installation, all right. Compared to the newest of hospitals, like in Oakville, this place was a dive and a step back into the early 70s. And after all that, The doctor saw me for 5 minutes and couldn't even tell me what the issue was. So I went home. I was fuming. For all the talk of our healthcare system being so great, this experience was pure shit. I had similar experiences in the past with brutal waiting times for various not so serious conditions, and I could see that the doctors and the staff were overwhelmed. Hey, I guess that's what you get when everything's free. Though, to give the devil his due, I did have an operation on my arm some time ago, and it was a positive experience, but the MRI scan required took a month to schedule. Meanwhile, I needed a frickin' operation. That's what happens when you have something wrong that's not life and death. Oh yeah, and how about this? If you need dental work and you don't have a private insurance plan, you'll be paying through the nose. There's something you Americans don't know. Canadian National Health does not cover dental unless you're under 18 and in a very low-income family. Speaking of doctors and staff being overwhelmed, if you go into a walk-in clinic, they'll have you out the door before you even have a chance to sit down and warm up the seat. And good luck finding a family doctor. When my neighbor's family doctor died, it took him 5 years to find another one that would take him on. When I see Trudeau brag about our healthcare system, I just want to puke. The guy has no understanding of what hardworking average Canadians have to deal with. I'm sure he never goes to a national health doctor. What a spoiled man-child he is. Another thing you Americans are unaware of is that in certain of our provinces, we have lotteries for doctors. Because doctors that graduate or come into the system all want to work in the big cities. You think a graduate doctor with all those long, hard years of schooling behind him is going to want to work up in the cold, white north where the sun only shines 3 months a year? Think of it. If you're a doc and you lose that lottery, and you end up in a logging, mining, or glacier town in the great white north, you're not going to be a happy camper. You're not going to like your job, the people, the surroundings. You've seen people who don't like their jobs. We've all encountered a few of those along the way. They almost never give 100%. Is that the kind of doctor you want, eh? All right, me, Johnny here again. Thanks for that, good Sam. By the way, Sam, what are you good at? Bitching about all the free stuff you get? Just kidding. Oh, and good Sam has a PS. He says, Johnny, talk about a huge burden our healthcare system is on every taxpayer. Did you know that when a vehicle is sold in a Canadian province, there's a 15% tax that's added, a hospital tax, and for years it was printed right there on the tax forms. It's called something else now, but it's still there. Then he says, let that sink in, a 15% hospital tax, and on top of that, my 40% equivalent of your federal tax, which is a payroll deduction, comes right off the top of my check. And as for me, I own a house and I pay property tax and sales tax of over 15% on just about everything. So me and practically everyone else here in Canada is paying more than 50% of our income in taxes. That means for us Canadians, our single largest household expense is taxes. And then after that comes shelter, food, and all the real necessities. Let that sink in too. Meanwhile, all you liberal folks and politicians up in the USA, you think us Canadians are living so large and happy that we've discovered some perfect capitalist socialist mix and now we've got a sort of utopia. Again, I repeat, you just don't have any idea until you live up here yourself. All right, me, Johnny here. What do you think about that? Then comes this email from Leonard. He says, Johnny, everyone talks about those great Canadian and British national healthcare systems. Well, I'm a listener of yours, and I live close to Gatwick Airport. Let me tell you, the British national healthcare system is brilliant. If you're young, all you need is antibiotics and some blood drawn. It's when you get into your 50s, 60s, and 70s that the system will fail you terribly. You might not believe this, Johnny, but the British national healthcare system has waiting lists of about 6 months just to get an x-ray, and not to get something complicated like a CAT scan either. Unless, of course, you come in through an emergency room and you're in dire straits, then you'll get that x-ray sometime that day. But if it's an x-ray that's ordered from your doctor on a routine visit, because maybe he sees something suspicious, there's a 6-month wait, and it's free. But if you have the money, you can have that x-ray the very next day or even on the spot. Then he says, I wonder if you're hearing about our national health care problems on your side of the pond. Then he says, it's routine for someone getting diagnosed with cancer in Britain to have delays around 2 years before your full treatment plan is made and you're actually undergoing treatment. Socialized healthcare is killing people. Socialized healthcare is dependent on prioritization, meaning if it hurts and you're in pain, you get treated. If it's a long-term chronic care issue, you just don't get much care at all. The squeaky wheel gets the grease and all that. And let's not even talk about the massive influx of immigrants. They cost money too, and most of them have many medical problems right upon arrival. Then he says the system barely works when we're treating our own born in the UK citizens. But then again, it's true. UK citizens are not complainers. They really have nothing to compare their system against because the national healthcare system came in after World War II, so everyone alive in the UK today grew up under that system. I'd say it's comparable to the way U.S. citizens grew up under the promise of Social Security. You were promised a bill of goods, and the promise was broken. It started out as an old age retirement fund so that the elderly could live nice, normal lives when they weren't able to work anymore. But now everyone agrees you can't really live a good life on a U.S. Social Security check anymore. Well, our national healthcare system in the UK is built on broken promises too. After the war, when it was initiated, people looked at it as an unbelievable gift. Free healthcare for the masses. And now it's a system so massive, so bureaucratic, so broken, and so expensive that it just can't be fixed. All right, that comes from Mr. Dawson. Thanks for that. Mr. Dudley Dawson. Now, there's a classic Brit name if I've ever heard one. Dudley Dawson. You know, up in the States, if some parent was to name his kid Dudley, it's almost certain that kid will be confronting lots of bullies and lots of ass whoopings. Certain names do have their secondary effects, don't they? Speaking of names, you know, lots of black folks up in the States have crazy-ass names. And lots of Latinos and Latinas, too. I even ran across a Spanish language site that highlights certain crazy-ass names along with cédulas that would be ID documents proving these things are real. Look, I'm not making this stuff up. Like, for example, there was recently a kid born in Chile, and you know what his parents named him? #follow Sepulveda. I'm not kidding. If you want a copy or a download of his cédula, I have it. How about this guy? You probably heard me mention this before because it struck me so funny. His name is Adolfo Hitler Flores. Adolfo Hitler Flores. And the Spanish word for Adolf is Adolfo. It would stand to reason he was born in 1941 when Hitler looked like he was going to win the war. And plus, the guys from Ecuador and South America were just loaded with Nazis back then. Still some there. Oh, and I've run into a few Latinos named Mao and Stalin and Lenin, too. I mean, look, the president of Ecuador right now, his name is Lenin. Oh, and how about this kid? He was born in Chile in 2005. His name, Jack Daniels Martinez. Hey, I've got photos of their cédulas, that is, their ID documents to prove it. So if you want to laugh, send me an email, theexpatfiles@gmail.com. I'll send you the proof, some photos of their cédulas. And then there's this other guy. Chile seems to be big on this list. The guy's name is, get this, Shakespeare Mozart Perez. Parents must have been real classical music lovers. Got that? Shakespeare Mozart Perez. How about this guy from Colombia, born in 2001? His name is Batman Robin Roberto Camacho. Now, what were his parents thinking? Or what were they into? How about this guy, another one from Colombia? How do they get away with this? His name is, get this, Jesus Christ, that's Jesus Cristo Hitler Zeppelin Gonzalez. Once again, his handle on his ID documents, on his birth certificate, is Jesus Christ Hitler Zeppelin Gonzalez. Guess his parents were born-again Nazi Zeppelin fans, huh? Then there's this guy from the Dominican Republic. His name is Disneylandia Rodriguez. Disneylandia Rodriguez. You see, the Spanish word landia is land in English. Man, I'm telling you, the Disney World and the Disneyland obsession with Latin people knows no bounds. Right, how about this guy from Costa Rica? His true and legal name is Mr. That's Mister Rambo Campos Diaz. Mr. Rambo Campos Diaz. And how about this poor young lady from Paraguay? Her parents named her Transfiguration Lopez Mendoza. That's Transfiguration Lopez Mendoza. Poor kid. Parents must have been real New Agers. Now, you longtime listeners may have heard me mention I once ran into a guy a long time ago in Costa Rica. His name was Navi. That was his first name, Navi. But when he spelled it out, it was spelled U.S. Navy. Maybe his dad, uncle, tio, primo, whatever, was Swabi. That said, I'm looking right now at a cedula, an ID document, Navi Marina Perez. That's U.S. Navy Marina Perez. I like the little Marina tie-in, don't you? So obviously the term U.S. Navy is non-gender specific. And last but not least, you've got an unfortunate but pretty young lady from Venezuela. Her parents named her Eco-Friendly Evergreen Marcano. Eco-Friendly Evergreen Marcano. Wow, you can only think when her parents named her they were on shrooms or ayahuasca or something. All right, how about a few more crazy-ass Latin names? Now, you longtime listeners might remember a couple of months ago, I was driving around in a cab driven by a guy named Benjamin Franklin. Yeah, I got to meet a dead founding father in the flesh. Actually, he was a black Latino. But I've run into Latinos and Latinos with weirder names than that. I ran into a guy once, he was a construction worker. His name was Little Face Castillo. Yep, Little Face Castillo. Another guy, Jose Darling. I like that one. Hey, Jose Darling. Of course, it's the English word darling, so he probably doesn't even know what his name refers to. Oh, and one of my gringo friends has a cleaning lady. Her name is Happy Birthday Blanca. I bet she's fun at parties. Oh, and I ran into a hippie Corrado, and last summer, a Latino named Jingle Bells Baez. He was a bellhop working at a big first world hotel, and I saw it on his name tag. And I used to think River Phoenix had a misplaced handle. Hey, after seeing this poor Venezuelan girl's name, Eco-Friendly Evergreen, come on. It sounds like a military code over the radio, calling Eco-Friendly Evergreen over and out. Poor kid, huh? I guess I'll never make fun of a Lakeisha, Lamisha, or Latricia again.
You've
been listening to the Expat Files, Living in Latin America. If you need some help with your own Plan B, you can schedule a one-on-one phone call with me. But first, download my free Plan B questionnaire at www.thenewexpat.com. Better yet, if you want to get your Plan B going from right up there in the States, just sign up for my 9-hour Expat Essentials course. Get the perfect Plan B blueprint by going to theexpatfiles.com/academy. Nos vemos.